What's up, YouTube? Alright, so I'm gonna get into this, my ideas on masculinity, from my personal philosophy, which I have to warn you, it is pretty brutal. Hence the name of the title of this video. But I thought I should talk about it because this is technically what I run on. This is how I think, right? Now, something that I would have to get into like a little bit is the distinction between gender and sex. So sex is biological, male, female. Gender is an identity, is a something like something that when you talk about gender, it's not necessarily something that you could talk to a biologist about. You would have to talk to a philosopher, a psychologist, or anthropologist about, because it really has to do with how you feel. Now, I'm going to get more into masculinity, but I'm going to talk about gender broadly, in and out. Now, a lot of my ideas around this topic comes from my experiences with transcendental meditation. And by that I mean it is a study of Hindu philosophy, and through deep meditation, accessing levels of ego death that left me in a position where I don't actually care what I identify as. I don't think that building an identity around a gender or a specific character, trait or flaw or any of these types of things, like building an identity around something, seems very futile and naive. It's not an accurate way to live your life. And I understand that there are men that very strongly identify with masculinity, and that's a big part of their persona, their character, their identity. And then there are other people that gender is a big part of their identity. Let's say transgender or non-binary, gender fluid, or all of these, or the neo pronouns and blah blah blah, right? Now, I'm gonna be talking mainly on how I feel about it, so please don't take offense. I understand if you were born a man and you transition to a woman and you identify with women. I'm not telling you not to identify as that, but I think that even a person that is within that space would understand that identifying in either direction inherently comes with a burden. Whether you identify as a trans woman or an extremely masculine man, we tend to create these fantastical realities, and we create like a persona from a movie to play. It's like a mask that we wear. And now, I don't want to get too deep into the area of transgenderism and all of that, because this is not really what I'm trying to talk about. But I had to mention it because those are people that identify with a gender, and that's a big part of who they are. And I'm not trying to say that they're not justified in having that identity, or that that identity is wrong in any type of way. What I am saying is that holding on to that identity and turning it into your whole character will come with burdens and suffering. Now, what I really wanted to talk about was masculinity, because I tend to gravitate towards very masculine things. I am a power lifter. I specifically do mobility training, endurance training, yoga, so that I can be extremely in control of my body. I do a lot of calisthenics so that I can have domination over my body weight. I do a lot of martial arts. I do some weapons training. And I do all of these things not because they're masculine, but because they have utility. The reality is this: if you're into this like red pill space where everybody is the top G, super masculine, tough guy, that, you know, you're the manliest man that ever been, and like, you're silly. You're silly, and you're building a facade to hide from the actual fact that you're extremely, extremely fragile. You can take the most absurdly, overtly masculine, tough guy, and if I shoot him in the face, he dies. If I stab him in the belly, he bleeds and oozes shit until he dies. It doesn't matter. This idea to live your entire life based off of I am super masculine is very, very naive. And I'm not saying that masculine traits are bad. What I'm saying is building an identity around those masculine traits are bad for you. You can still do it, but then you will have to constantly lie to yourself. And I understand that this might sound bad because this would translate to being true about women that are very, very feminine. But it would also be true about men that are very feminine and identify with that, and women that are very masculine and identify with that. And then it would leach over to all of the LGBTQ section of people. And I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that identifying is bad. I'm saying that it's bad for you. Because ultimately, what we do is that we build all of this stuff. We build this mask and decorate it, and we wear it with pride. And when something chips off a piece of that mask, what are you left with? Ultimately, I find that this experience of ego death has shown me that I can do very masculine things and not identify with it. And I can also have and display very feminine traits and not identify with it. Now, this would let you might be asking, then you don't identify as anything. Now, I searched around the LGBTQ space to see, is there a term? And what I've heard was apogender or apogender. But even that I don't identify as. Ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is that this idea that you have to be a certain way is ultimately detrimental to yourself. Because then it becomes a thing that you have to uphold, and you have to continuously do things to convince yourself that you are what you think you are, when you can just not think that you are anything. You can, instead of saying, this is me, this is my body, and I am this and that, I'm a power lifter, a martial artist, a this, a this, a this, a this, and these are all parts of my character, and blah, 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 blah. I can just say, I do these things, but I am not those things. And then that means that I can practice martial arts without the intention of being perceived as a martial artist. So I honestly don't give a single crap about how you see me when it comes to martial artists. If you think that I'm a terrible martial artist, that's fine. I simply don't care. And the same concept leads over to my masculinity, my femininity, or anything in between, and any of these other traits, whether they be masculine or feminine. I simply don't care. And I feel that this is a more higher state of being. And that's kind of where I'm really trying to take this, is to show you that this state of being is better than identification. Because when you identify and something pokes a hole in that identity, then you feel things that don't feel good. And on the other end, when something bolsters this identity, when something affirms that identity, it makes you feel good. And you might say, well, if it makes you feel good, why is that bad? Well, what happens is, if you have an identity and something affirms that identity and you feel good, then it leads you down the rabbit hole of searching for that affirmation. Now you want to be seen as the very masculine man, or the very feminine woman, or the opposites of those. Or I want to be seen as a really good martial artist. I want to be seen as a elite BJJ guy or Muay Thai guy. I want to be seen as a very strong power lifter. I want to be. And this is where it's leading to this want. And the more you want, the more you chase. Instead of all of that, you can just not give a shit and just do the things that you enjoy and keep yourself busy, and eventually you'll be dead. Now, if you don't want to just do meaningless things, ultimately everything is meaningless, but if you don't want to just do completely aimless things, oh, well, I enjoy smoking crack, so let's smoke crack every day. Like, all right, doing what you enjoy isn't a great way to live your life under all circumstances. So I would say, find things that you enjoy that have utility, and then go down the path of mastering those things. Personally, this would be good for someone who wants to engage in very masculine things. You see, being strong has utility. The stronger you are, the more capable you are of doing things. The more mobile you are, the more capable you are. The more flexible you are, the more capable you are. And if you maintain strength, endurance, mobility, and flexibility, you will age more gracefully. And in your later years, you will retain a lot of the muscle, a lot of the strength, a lot of these things that will make your life better further down the line. And it just happens to be that these things are very masculine. Another thing that I would say would be very masculine and also have utility would be studying philosophy, psychology, sociology, theology, history, because these things give you a good grasp on reality, on how it's been up to this point and how it will most likely go into the future. Knowing a lot about these things will help you understand how to use your mind to solve problems, predict things accurately, and being able to predict things and solve problems are going to be extremely util. It will have utility in the long run. And then this would encompass training your body and your mind. And the last thing, I would say training your spirit. But everybody's going to have a different idea of what the spirit is. If you're a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, that's going to be one way of thinking of fortifying your spirit. And if you're a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Taoist, that's going to be another way of dealing with spirituality. And then we have all of these other religions and spiritual practices from all over the world. So spiritual things is not something that I can get too deep into in this video, because ultimately there's just so many differences depending on what your specific beliefs are. So I'm going to keep a little more towards what I'm trying to talk about, which is identity. Ultimately, I think that building an identity, period, isn't good for you. Building an identity would lead you down the path of maintaining the mask over your face and doing everything in your capability to make sure that that mask never falls. When you can just throw the mask away and be whatever you are in that moment. Now, there are some situations that I can see where identifying with something would be a big part of your reality. But even in the case of a transgender person, you can be transgender. Let's say you was born a boy, you transitioned and now you're a woman. Great, you're a woman. That might mean certain things. It might mean that you dress a certain way, that you speak a certain way, that you have certain body parts that you used to not have. It might mean all of these things, but why restrict yourself to this identity that might lead you down a path of needing and wanting certain things. And I know this might sound insensitive, and I'm not trying to be. What I'm suggesting is that no matter which gender you identify as, you can choose to not identify as it and just be it. You can choose to dress the way that makes you feel comfortable, act the way that makes you feel comfortable, do the things that make you feel comfortable, and in essence, be the identity without identifying with the identity, if that makes sense. And then what happens when you do this is when something happens that challenges that identity, there's nothing to care about. There's no reason to feel any type of way. Someone says, oh, well, you're still a man. Okay, that's what you believe. Like, if you don't care about the identity, truly speaking, what could you possibly feel after that? There's nothing to be felt. It's like, yeah, that's fine, but I'm still gonna dress like this and act like this and speak like this, and I'm gonna take these drugs because it helps me look like this, and I'm still going to, do these things and go to these places and blah 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 blah. And well, I'm against it. Well, eat a dick. Like, I don't care what you think, right? And then what happens here is that you end up taking back a certain power, because now when the person says the offensive thing, you feel nothing. There's nothing happening to you in that moment. And when they say, well, I don't want you to do the thing, and then you tell them, eat a dick, I'm gonna do it anyways, then they're the ones that have to be left with this uncomfortable feeling. So I hope that I'm not being too insensitive, because my way of looking at things is pretty brutal. But what I'm trying to get at is you can let the person that's mad at the way you look and the way you act be mad without you feeling a single thing. And this would bring me back to the masculine side of this. If a very masculine man gets challenged on his masculinity, but you don't identify with that masculinity, then what ego is there to be harmed or injured? And you see, that's the main key of all of this, that ultimately when that identity is being challenged and you feel uncomfortable or hurt, it's the ego that's being hurt. If you let go of the ego and don't identify and don't care and just let yourself be what you are in any given moment, constantly changing and constantly moving, then you can still feel emotions, but they somewhat become obsolete. There still will be emotions because you're not negating, you're not blocking or suppressing emotions. It's just that there's going to be a large spectrum of things that would have would have made you felt something before, that now that you don't identify with anything, you no longer feel. Once you stop identifying with things, a lot of pointless and meaningless emotions disappear, and that leaves space for the true emotions. That thing made me laugh, and me laughing made me happy. That's awesome. Oh, I watched that movie and that scene was sad. I cried a little bit. That's awesome. And because of this, you're not forced into an extremely masculine or extremely feminine or any specific brand between the two. When you're happy, you smile. When you're sad, you cry. And it doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't matter. It was just an emotion. You felt it, and then it went away, like everything else. All right. I think that was enough for today. I'm going to continue on this path. I guess I'm going to call this my brutal philosophy, and then stipulate the topic at hand.